So are you scratching your head wondering why you're gaining weight on a plant-based diet? After every teacher and influencer in this community has told you that it's amazing for weight loss. Or perhaps you're not actually gaining weight, you're not going up the scale right now, but you're still not losing it either, despite following all the rules you heard about plant-based eating online. If right now you're asking, is it only me this is happening to? You're seeing everyone else get these incredible transformations from a plant-based diet online. Is it just me? I'm here to tell you, you're so very wrong, and there's a lot of people for whom this isn't that effortless. In this video, I'm going to share with you the 2 common reasons why some plant-based dieters really do struggle to lose weight, and give you the action steps to go and fix those things so you can finally get the scale moving in the right direction this time. Reason number 1 why you might be gaining weight right now, or certainly not losing it on a plant-based diet, is that you're simply eating too many calories. For some reason, and not to speak disparagingly about folks who largely give very good advice, many of my fellow teachers in this plant-based community don't ever talk about calories. You've heard them say, just eat plants and you'll lose weight. They've told you stories about how they lost 50 pounds effortlessly without ever having to think about calories. And I'm not saying that they're lying to you. That does genuinely happen. But just because somebody didn't have to think about calories to lose weight, that doesn't mean that they're not important and that they weren't integral to their success. What I'm about to say next is very controversial to some people, but I've got so much conviction and belief in this. People don't successfully lose weight on a plant-based diet because they're following nutritarian, the starch solution, Esselstyn style eating, a high carb approach. It doesn't matter about the particular version of a whole foods plant-based diet you follow. You will lose weight on all of them by being in a calorie deficit. You will gain weight adversely on all of them if you're in a calorie surplus, regardless of the individual intricacies of the particular approach you're taking. You see, most dieters overestimate the rules of the particular diet they're following, thinking, oh, I've got to cut carbs, I've got to do keto, I've got to eat loads of protein, I've got to do the starch solution. That's what's going to help me lose weight. No, you've got to be in a calorie deficit. That is the bottom line. However, with that said, I've argued for years that following a whole foods plant-based diet makes it so much easier to be in a calorie deficit, and it's the healthiest, most nourishing way to do it. 3 reasons why it's easier to be in a calorie deficit on a plant-based diet. Number 1, many plant foods have a very low caloric density. You get lots of volume for very few calories comparatively. Number 2, many plant foods, most plant foods frankly, have very high fiber content. Fiber helps you stay fuller for longer. And number 3, many plant foods are so ridiculously high in nutrients that they have this incredible nourishment/satiation factor in conjunction with the other previous 2 benefits. All of this means that a plant-based diet is a really effective way to maintain a calorie deficit and therefore lose weight. But the whole point I'm trying to make with my rant here, my spiel, is that it isn't guaranteed. So let me ask you this. If you can hand on heart say that you're really consistent with your nutrition right now and you're not losing weight, or adversely, you're actually gaining weight, is it possible that you're simply eating too many calories, even if from very healthy whole plant foods? If that does seem to be the case for you, if you do suspect that you've been overdoing the calories slightly, here are your next action steps. For the next 3 days, I want you to continue eating normally, but you're going to use an app like MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, or some other nutrition tracking software to track your calories. Despite eating very cleanly, despite adhering to the tenets of whole foods plant-based eating that you've seen and read about here online and in books and whatnot, there's a very good chance that you're actually consuming more calories than your advised calorie maintenance baseline. If so, your next step is to look at the foods that contribute the most calories to your daily diet and think about how you might be able to switch them out for lower calorie options. Not eliminating them altogether, but reducing your consumption of them. And here's a few ways to do this, a couple of hacks as examples here. Number 1, if you find after tracking that your fat intake is well over 20% of your daily calories, you can reduce the amount of avocado, nuts, seeds, nut butters, and so on in your daily diet. That's a great way to trim off some calories. Number two, you could also try downsizing the amount of whole grains in your meals and replace them with fruits and vegetables, which tend to have a lower caloric density. Finally, number three, consider just reducing your portions overall. Do you really need that last couple of forkfuls of your burrito bowl? Do you really need those 2 to 3 snacks that you have throughout the day? Are you actually hungry when you go and eat those snacks, or is it more stress relief or boredom as to why you turn for those things? It's very easy for folks, that engage in mindless eating to add 150, 300 extra calories onto their daily diet just by grabbing things without thinking about it too much throughout the day. But the bottom line, the first reason why you might be gaining weight or certainly not losing it on a plant-based diet is because you're consuming too many calories overall, despite eating very healthily. Yes, that's entirely possible, and I see it more often than you might think. None of this is to say that it's only calories that matter for weight loss, of course. There are other variables that contribute, but calories are a difference maker that for some reason don't get talked about enough in this plant-based community. Oh, George is messing around on camera here, off the camera here rather. Reason number two, let's get serious, George, come on. Reason number two, let's assume that you're avoiding all the mistakes I've just shared in reason one. You are actually in a calorie deficit. Well, why on earth aren't you losing weight then? Because you're probably not in one as consistently as you think or hope. Are you one of those Monday to Friday dieters perhaps? It's all controlled during the week, but it all goes to pot on the weekend. Because I know my audience relatively well at this stage, I've been making videos and interacting with you for a few years here, I can say with confidence that there's a large probability that you at home watching this are in a calorie deficit at least a couple of days a week. And I know this because many of my clients who come to me after watching my YouTube videos, when I examine what they've done wrong in the past, why they weren't losing weight prior to joining my program, my diagnosis more often than not is always the following. Look, large parts of your diet are frankly excellent. Really healthy, really weight loss friendly. There was a very good chance that you're actually in a calorie deficit a couple of times a week, but there's enough bad habits here, there's enough poor food choices to outweigh all the good stuff you were doing. So brass tacks, if you're in a calorie deficit 2 to 3 days a week, let's say it's more like 4 or 5, you're even more consistent, but there's 2 or 3 days every week where you're in that calorie surplus, yes, that could absolutely be enough to outweigh the better days and keep your weight stagnated. And my big, bold promise in this video is if you could just find another level of consistency, you'd be amazed at how quickly the scale can jumpstart. So how do you do that then? How do you consistently make sure you're in that calorie deficit? Step one, you need repetition in your meals, in your exercise regimen, otherwise you can't test what is and what isn't working. It's different if you're counting calories, but most of my audience don't like doing that. Because if you're counting your calories, you can set your calorie targets every day and know that regardless of the diversity, the variety of your meals, you're still going to be in an appropriate calorie ballpark, right? But if you're not counting your calories and you wish to continue counting your calories, you're going to have to be way more repetitive with what you're eating and how much you're eating to test if that actually works. And if the scale isn't producing a 1 to 2 pounds per week weight loss, that's a very clear sign that something needs to change. Step number two, to make sure you consistently stay in a calorie deficit, you need a plan. How can you stay consistent if you don't know what you're actually being consistent to? So write down exactly what you're going to eat for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and any snacks for the next week. Commit to a particular exercise regimen for the next week to support those weight loss efforts. How can you guarantee that you're consistently in a calorie deficit if you don't have a plan, if it's all just done on a whim, if it's all just hit and hope? You wake up every morning scratching your head thinking, what am I going to eat today to lose weight? That's not good enough. It's not intentional enough. It's not strategic enough. You need a clear structure so you can actually have something to aim for. If you don't know what your good behavior is going to look like, how could you recognize when you're making mistakes and call out your bad behavior? So you need that clear plan. Step three, I mentioned this word earlier, testing. This whole weight loss process is about testing. You will figure out if you're in a calorie deficit consistently or not by whether the scale moves down or it doesn't. So you make a plan, you then test if that plan works by actually staying consistent, you monitor what the scale does, that's direct feedback on how effective that plan is, and then you change or keep your strategy the same based on the feedback that the scale gives you. If you're losing weight, that's a clear sign that you're mostly doing the right stuff. It might not be perfect, but more often than not, you're in that calorie deficit every single day. And this is the whole process, right? You lose weight for a while after you try out a plan, then you hit a plateau, then you tweak, you change something, on until you reach your ideal healthy weight range. Two must-dos to make sure you are accurately testing and therefore losing weight every single week. Number one is don't give up prematurely, right? Don't throw in the towel when you're a couple of days in. That's not nearly enough time to test if your plan actually works. Step two, have a set method for tracking your progress to make sure you are actually losing weight every single week and you feel fantastic doing it because you're watching that scale go down through recording your results. The way I like to do this is have my clients weigh in 3 times a week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's more than enough data to tell if what they've been doing since Monday is effective or not. Progress photos are also beneficial, but they're not really helpful in ascertaining if your plan is successful in the short term. That's more kind of month to month. So make a plan, lots of repetition, same meals, same exercise schedule, test if that plan actually works. Sooner or later, you will stumble across a formula that gets that scale dropping the right way. Let's recap quickly here so you're clear on your next action steps. I don't want this to be another YouTube video that you sit through and take no action on. I want you to actually go and implement the lessons you've learned after watching this. There are 2 reasons why you're gaining weight or certainly not losing it on a plant-based diet. Number 1, you're not in a calorie deficit, probably because you heard that you didn't have to worry about calories to lose weight when you're eating whole foods. Number 2, you are actually in a calorie deficit some days of the week, but it's not nearly consistent enough to have any major breakthrough on the scale. You can fix both of these problems by finally understanding and respecting the role that calories play in weight loss, whether you like it or not. And that doesn't mean that you have to count your calories every single day. I certainly don't. But once in a while, you might need to monitor how many calories you're consuming, make some reductions from there, and then stick with that revised plan long enough to actually fairly test if it works or not. And whilst all of this might sound overwhelming, it's a little bit boring, it's a bit tedious, isn't it, having to track your calories, even if it's just for a couple of days. Most people don't want to do that. But I promise you this, once you finally get that scale moving consistently, after weeks or months of stagnation, it's so worth the trouble, it's so worth the hassle, I promise you. And that's all from me today. If you want more plant-based diet and weight loss tips, make sure you're following me on Instagram @RyanAdamsUK. I'll also link it down below. And if you ever need more help putting this all together, if you want me to personally coach you through this entire process so you don't have to figure it all out by yourself, I'll also put a link to my coaching program down in the description box below as well. See you soon.